Hi everybody, welcome to In Stitches with Mary. I'm Mary and it's February. So you know what comes next? That's right, March. And in March we have St. Patrick's Day. I have got this cute little Luck Be With You wall hanging that I think is just adorable, and I want to show you how this goes together. To put this together, it's very simple. You're going to cut 2.5-inch squares. You're going to need 40 for your white background, and you're going to need 38 for a variety of greens that maybe you even have in scraps. It doesn't take that much, but 2.5-inch squares arranged in a variety of ways. So here's what I've done. I've got mine cut, and I want to show you what I have on the back. I highlighted this little tip back last year in club, but this is the back of an old vinyl tablecloth, and it's the backing on this works great for staging quilts. So when you go to pick this up, the squares aren't going to fall off. You can get this arranged and then take it right over to your sewing machine. If you're not ready to sew it together, I lay a piece of plastic bag over top, roll it up, unroll it, and that's actually how I got it here today from home to the store. It was just rolled up. So this is a real handy thing to do. I folded this up because it's a smaller for the quilt I'm doing here. So that's my little tip for the day. But then what you're going to do is to arrange your squares, and these are 8 blocks by 8 blocks. The outside is going to be your white, and then we're going to start arranging our green. You're going to need a whole grid of green, and then in your corners and the curves here where would be our to make our clover, you're going to need some white as well. So you'll have a green and a white for each of those. And that's exactly what I have right here. On each of those, you're going to draw a diagonal and stitch on that diagonal. If you can see what I've done there. Stitch on that diagonal. I have this one stitched. You'll then trim 1/4 inch off. Now I just saw a little tip. A lot of people say, well, that is such a waste because you got all this here. I just heard this little tip. Go ahead and stitch another one 1/2 inch out and then cut in between, and now you've got that little one sewn and you got a tiny little half square triangle already stitched together. For those of you who don't like to waste, that's just a little idea. So you're going to trim that out and then press towards the dark side. And you've got 12 of those that you need to do. At this point, decide where are you going to put the bottom of your clover, because we need to make our stem. And I'm going to put the stem right over here on this side. And to do that, you're going to take your half square triangle and your bottom square, and you're going to sew those together with that scant 1/4 inch seam. When you have that done, I've got mine done right here, you will need another rectangle of fabric. Now this is a little bit bigger. You would think, oh, you just need it 2.5 inches wide. I've tried it different ways, and I didn't want you to have to buy a special ruler. So we're going to do some measuring on this square. This is actually 3 inches wide by 5 inches long, and that's generous. We'll trim it up later. What you'll need to do is come from your upper right corner, and you're going to measure down 1/4 inch and draw diagonally to your lower left corner and come in 1/4 inch. That's going to be our stitching line. Then I want you to draw another 1/4 inch here and cut it off there. When you get that done, you've got that trimmed off, you are going to lay that, so here is our triangle. This is this piece right here. You're going to lay that down so that that line we drew is actually laying on our point to point, from corner to opposite corner, and we're going to stitch that line. Okay, you're just going to stitch right along there and press that down. We're going to trim off this extra here, and then you'll press that down and then trim it up so that it's 2.5 inches wide, 4.5 inches. That's going to create our stem. What's left now is to sew these all together. You can go ahead, I would sew these 3 and these 3 together, sew those 2 rows together, and then onto this side, repeat for this side, and then just sew your 1/4 inch seams. I got in my directions which way to press your seams. So like your odd rows, you're going to press to the left, your even rows press to the right, and then when you lay those rows together to stitch, those seams will nestle and you reduce that bulk. So you're going to get it all stitched together. What's left to do is to add your border on each side, bottom, make your quilt sandwich, and add your binding. Now, before you turn your binding over and stitch that in place, I've added a little bit of a casing here to add a dowel inside for hanging it. Let me show you a trick for doing that. I've allowed for a 3.5 inch piece of fabric. This finishes out at 20 inches wide, so I cut this at 19 inches, folded each end under a 1/2 inch, and then folded this in half. This gets stitched in place along with your binding. The first row, the first time you stitch around your binding, this is stitched in with your binding, and then your binding's going to roll right over top. What's left, a lot of people like to hand stitch that. If you know me by now, you know I don't like to do hand stitching. So I take this to my sewing machine. Let me pull the dowel out of there. It'll be easier. I take this to the sewing machine and I use my blind hem stitch on that. So I'm running right along there, and when that needle comes over, it just grabs a little bit of the backing and the batting. You're not going to see it on the front side. So that's just a little added trick for putting a casing on the back for wall hanging, and it's set to go up on your wall. And we are ready for St. Patrick's Day. So the luck be with you, and I hope you've enjoyed this. If you'd like the pattern, it's right here at Neil's Vacuum and Sewing Center. Give us a call.